All right, well, thanks for having me. My remarks are going to be fairly short and then hopefully have plenty of time to answer any questions. I'm covering the Mission Supporting Grand Challenge work scope, which is really a pretty broad and far-reaching work scope, but a very important one, where this is really an area to propose things that are addressing major issues facing nuclear energy right now that aren't otherwise called out in other work scopes. So I'll briefly talk about our main priority areas in NE and a little bit about what we're doing in those areas, but leave it to you guys to look at the other work scopes and figure out exactly how your ideas fit within this versus other work scopes. I can tell you that we are not looking for things here that are part of our mainline programs. In other words, things that we are doing quite a bit of work in already. This is more of an area to fill the gaps in areas that we are either doing very little or ideally nothing at all, but again, things that are critically important to the future of nuclear energy. So with that, I'll go to this slide, which lays out the four mission pillars or priority areas that we have within the Office of Nuclear Energy. And I'll talk a little bit more about the first three of these, which are primarily research and development focused. The global competitiveness, the last one, is a little bit more on the policy and international engagement side. But again, if there's work to be done in those areas that you guys think you could be beneficial to help make sure the U.S. Retains and regains and enhances our U.S. leadership and the deployment of U.S. technologies around the world, then please offer those up as well. They would be much appreciated. But I'll dive into a little bit of detail on the other areas, the existing fleet, keeping that going as long as possible, and ensuring the economic viability, developing and deploying advanced nuclear systems, and then the things that we're doing on the fuel cycle side. So in terms of sustaining the existing fleet, a lot of our work to date through the LWRS program, Light Water Reactor Sustainability, has focused on developing the technical basis for subsequent license renewals going to 80 years. But now that we're seeing utilities go forward with those, more of the focus is addressing the more urgent need for the current fleet, is making sure they don't retire prematurely. In other words, prior to the end of their existing operating license. And this is mainly an economic issue, market issue, where nuclear plants aren't making up enough revenue to cover their costs. So we're looking for things both from a policy standpoint at the national, state, local level, trying to understand what market changes may be required to make sure nuclear plants are being properly valued and compensated in the market. And some things have happened at the state level to do that. But then through R&D, we're also looking at ways to reduce costs and increase revenue. So if it's, accident tolerant fuels where you may get more bang for your buck and get more energy out per unit fuel, or be able to experience some cost savings because of the safety improvements, to looking at how to operate more flexibly and going beyond electricity to things like desalination or hydrogen production, etc., or just running the plant more flexibly and how to do that. There's just a couple of examples. So lots of opportunities here. I know we have several work scopes that also address this. So if this is an area of interest, as with the others that I'll cover, please take a look to make sure that your ideas aren't better suited for one of the other areas, because we are looking for things that are A, relevant to our program, but also B, filling gaps that we're not doing within our other areas. So then moving towards advanced reactors, I'll just highlight this slide. I know there's a lot of work to get these technologies from paper to commercial deployment. But another thing that's really important to do here is also look at the new opportunities. It's not, this one advanced reactor to replace the existing fleet and then we're done. It's not just 24/7 base load electricity, gigawatt scale reactors anymore. We're building a catalog of options for different applications and different purposes and different customers. So how do we do that? How do we optimize a portfolio of nuclear options for both electricity generation and non-electric applications? And a few of those are listed here. But anything that really helps us move in this direction and kind of think outside the box that we have historically focused on in nuclear technology development are areas that are ripe for development. And this would include engaging the communities and end users and others that may not be currently thinking about nuclear. Amazon's, Google's, Facebook's, and their data centers, for example, could be work related to that, and figuring out how we can optimize that and penetrate those markets would be very valuable. Then moving on to the fuel cycle, we've historically focused more on the back end, whether it's recycling used fuel or looking at storage and disposal options. Those are both those are all very important topics that we're still interested in. From a recycling standpoint, how do we think about it differently? It's developing economic processes that are meet our non-proliferation objectives, but there's likely policy or other actions that will have to take place and decisions to really move the U.S. in this direction. So what are things that could be done there, both from a technology side, but also thinking differently about how we would implement this, not just create a cheap thing for industry to go deploy. That may not be the ultimate way we would do it. So looking at the back end, but also now looking at the front end. There's been a lot of attention paid recently to the front end, especially with uranium mining in the U.S. and the challenges that our miners are experiencing, but the whole front end through mining, milling, conversion, enrichment, fabrication. We want to make sure we have a strong and robust U.S. supply chain and industry for those things. Are there research opportunities that could make U.S. generated fuel in all facets more economically competitive in the U.S. and in the global market? I don't know if there's a significant change like fracking, or if there's an analogy, but kind of think like that. That revolutionized the oil and gas industry. Is there something we can do from a nuclear standpoint that could revolutionize and help stabilize our U.S. domestic supply chain? And of course, anything else that I didn't cover, but just highlighting a few things that are current priorities. And with that, I will stop and leave the rest of the time for any questions that anybody may have.
Okay, thanks, Brad. We will open up the question and answer box on your GoToWebinar application. Please do submit any questions you have for Brad over the next few minutes.
And I will add here too, didn't have a specific slide on it, but community outreach, education, stakeholder engagement, we've put a lot of focus on that the last couple of years. We have a great communications team that we've built up here that's doing a lot of work, getting out into the community through Millennial Nuclear Caucuses. We've been engaging state and local officials, holding events on the Hill, all about how you communicate nuclear, how you dispel falsities and get the real information out in a way that the common person can understand. focus. So taking our scientist and engineer hat off and talking to our neighbors in a way that they can understand to help increase the support for nuclear. So that's another area that I think we would welcome ideas on.
Brad, we have a few questions.
Okay.
Would you support the development of new methods for accident-tolerant fuels preparation? An example is uranium silicide.
I mean, I don't want to say yes or no to any ideas right now. And I apologize, I haven't read thoroughly all of the other work scopes, but obviously advanced fuel development, accident tolerant fuels, within our existing program, we're pretty focused on the types of fuels that can be deployed in the near term. I know they're also looking at longer term options. So if that's something that does not fit within the existing programs or existing work scopes, I think it would be fair to submit it here. But I would encourage you first to and potentially also reach out. I know we list the points of contacts for the other areas. Potentially also engage the fuel POCs to get their thoughts on that.
Brad, will fission product transmutation be considered as part of closing the gap?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of companies and technologies that could utilize transmutation fuel and closing the fuel cycle and recycling. So we're doing some work in that area. It has not, over the last couple of years, been a major priority, but I think that is something we continue to be interested in. And again, I'll refer to our material recovery work scopes. I'm not exactly sure the specific language they're looking for this year, but just encourage you to take a look at that and see if what you're thinking about fits there, and if not, this could be an opportunity.
Would new measurement techniques that would significantly improve monitoring of crucial plant components and therefore reduce maintenance costs be of interest?
Again, potentially. I mean, a lot of these ideas so far, at least at the level the questions are being asked, sound very similar to things that we're doing. So I'm trying to be careful not to say yes or no here, but most of these ideas that have been brought up so far sound very similar, including this one where we have work scopes in multiple areas developing instrumentation and have a specific program under our NEAT program working on this. So again, we're encourage you to look at those. This is not intended to be, hey, we didn't ask for this very specific thing this year, but really it fits within an existing program. We're looking for things that we really aren't doing anything in. So I leave that for the applicants to decide, but we are kind of sounding like we're getting down the road of, I don't quite fit in this work scope, so I'm going to try this other one instead, and that's not what this work scope is intended to be.
Approximately how many awards would be made under this work scope?
I don't know where the budget will end up. We will balance it between the number of high quality proposals and the overall budget that NEAP gets next fiscal year, which we still don't have a final number on that, but I would say a couple or a few, up to a couple or a few. I believe, Drew, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe one award was made this fiscal year.
That's correct.
Okay.
Another fuels question, Brad. Does this scope include designing new fuel with potential for significantly higher burnup? And what kind of TR is expected?
I think, again, it would depend on how innovative and different the concept is. We have a very robust fuel development program where that would be the first place I would recommend you look. But if this is something that's very innovative and novel that we aren't currently working on or haven't considered within our main program, then it could potentially fit here.
We'll keep Brad here for another 30 seconds or so. Please do submit your, Brad, could you talk to TR levels?
Oh, I mean, obviously, one of the main goals here is things that can have a big impact, and the sooner they can have a big impact, the better. But I don't want to bin this work scope in a particular TRL level. I think anything that is innovative and disruptive and could be a big game changer for nuclear is welcome, but also realize that the challenges the current fleet is facing are immediate. So a solution that's proposed that's 5 or 10 or even 3 years down the line may be too far away. And similarly, we are being pushed and pushing ourselves to get advanced nuclear technologies to market as quick as possible. There's pending legislation, the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act, that would in fact require us to demonstrate 2 reactors by 2025. So we really need to be moving on that now and are probably behind schedule, actually. So keep that in mind. I mean, it does not have to be late TRL, but the sooner it can be impactful, the better.
Thanks, Brad. Those are all the questions we have.
Okay.
We will reconvene in about 10 minutes for the used fuel disposition work scopes coming out of the DOE Nevada site office. I do want to make a comment that we are experiencing some severe weather here in Germantown, and there is always a possibility that we could drop off of the internet. So we will return in 10 minutes. Thank you.